Ready to shake things up in the world of qualitative research.
Oh, absolutely. I think we all are.
This deep dive is all about uncovering some truly innovative approaches. We're going beyond, the usual suspects like interviews and focus groups.
Right. Those are important, but there's a whole world out there.
Exactly. And our guide for this journey is Dr. Phillip Adu, a methodology expert who's really passionate about pushing those boundaries in qualitative research.
He really is. And his work is so insightful.
You can find him at centerforresearchmethods.com, by the way, if you're ready to really dive in after this.
I always tell people to check out his work.
He's put together what he calls a blueprint for creating innovative qualitative methods, and it's really got my gears turning.
Yeah, the blueprint analogy is really fitting. It's not just a list of methods. It's more like you said, a blueprint or even a set of building blocks that you can use to actually construct a research approach perfectly tailored to your needs.
Exactly. It's about empowering you, the researcher, to design and build your own approach.
I like that.
And he breaks this blueprint down into 8 distinct categories. Want to run through them for us?
Absolutely. We have philosophical paradigm, data collection strategy, data generation technique, qualitative data analysis strategy, type of study, disciplinary lenses, the population, location, and/or era the researcher is focusing on, and finally, technology and/or virtual platform.
Whoa, okay, lots to unpack there. Philosophical paradigm, data collection strategy, those sound a little familiar, I have to admit.
Yeah, those are kind of the classics.
But data generation technique and the population, location, and/or era, those have me intrigued.
Yeah, definitely.
What makes those categories so different, and why are they important, for innovating in research?
Well, you've hit on 2 of the most exciting areas where innovation is happening right now.
Okay, good.
Let's start with data generation technique. This category really pushes us to think beyond simply, asking questions or just observing behavior.
Okay.
It's about finding really creative, engaging, and even sometimes unconventional ways to tap into those experiences and perspectives.
So it's less about the what's of the data and more about the how.
Yes.
How you're getting that rich, qualitative information.
Precisely. Think about it like this. Let's say you're trying to understand how people feel about a new park in their city. Instead of just asking, what do you think of the park?
Right.
You might have them draw their experiences, maybe use photography to document what they see, or even create a collage representing their impressions. These techniques can really unlock a whole new level of understanding, especially when working with, complex emotions or experiences that are just hard to put into words.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm?
Okay, and what about the population, location, and/or era? What makes that category so innovative?
This category is all about challenging our assumptions about who and what we study. Like, for far too long, research has really focused on a narrow slice of the population, often overlooking certain communities, marginalized communities or unique cultural contexts.
So instead of that default to the kind of the usual suspects, researchers can use this category to really explore some new territories, geographically and culturally.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that knowledge is not one size fits all. Right?
Yeah.
Different communities have different ways of knowing and understanding the world. By expanding our focus to include a wider range of voices and perspectives, we gain a much richer and more nuanced understanding of the issues we're studying.
It's about being more inclusive.
Exactly.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity.
Right.
Let's unpack some of these categories one by one, starting with philosophical paradigm. Now, I'll admit, philosophical paradigms aren't usually like my go-to conversation starter.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling this is about more than just, abstract theory, right?
You're right. It's about setting that foundation for your entire research approach. Think of it like the bedrock upon which everything else is built, right? It's those fundamental beliefs and assumptions you bring to your research.
So how does choosing, say, a feminist method, like Dr. Adu mentions, shape the way you approach your research?
A feminist method, for example, is very concerned with power dynamics, social justice, and giving voice to those marginalized perspectives. If you're using this paradigm, those values are going to inform everything from the questions you ask to the way you collect and analyze your data.
So it's not just about the data itself, but the lens through which you're viewing and interpreting that data.
Exactly.
It's about being critically aware of your own position and how that might influence your research. Okay, that's making a lot more sense now. On to the next category, which is Data collection strategy.
Right.
This one seems pretty straightforward on the surface. We're talking about those classic methods like interviews, focus groups, document analysis, and observation. What makes this category, ripe for innovation?
Well, it might seem like familiar territory, but remember, even within these, traditional methods, there's always room for that creativity and adaptation. It's not necessarily about, going out and inventing a completely new method. It's more about finding ways to apply these methods in new contexts or to answer new kinds of questions.
So you're saying it's less about reinventing the wheel and more about finding creative ways to use the tools we already have.
Exactly. Like, for example, take interviews, right?
Yeah.
Instead of conducting them in, a sterile office environment, why not meet people in a place that's meaningful to them? Maybe a coffee shop. Or a park even.
Yeah.
Or think about incorporating those creative prompts, like asking participants to bring an object that represents their experience.
Oh, like that.
Or using visual aids to kind of, spark conversation.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see how even these, these familiar methods can be used in fresh and exciting ways.
And that's what's so great about Dr. Adu's blueprint. It really encourages us to challenge our assumptions about what qualitative research, can be.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm ready for some truly out-of-the-box thinking now.
Yeah.
Let's dive into data generation technique.
Yep.
This is where Dr. Adu lists some really cool examples like art-based methods, photo elicitation, even get this dance-based research. Dance-based research. Tell me more.
Here's where we really start to push the boundaries of what's possible with research. So imagine you're researching, say, the impact of a community garden on residents' well-being, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just asking people to describe their experiences, you might have them express themselves through movement.
Yeah.
How does being in the garden make them feel? What does it inspire them to do? You're analyzing their movements, their gestures, their facial expressions. All of that becomes part of the data.
Wow. And sometimes those nonverbal expressions are even more powerful than words, right?
Exactly, especially when dealing with those, sensitive or difficult topics.
I can see that. Like sometimes words just aren't enough. You need to tap into a different kind of language. Like you were saying, the language of art or movement or even silence to fully capture just how complex the human experience really is.
It's powerful.
Okay, I am fully on board with the data generation technique. This category alone has really opened up my mind to a whole new world of possibilities. But we have a lot more ground to cover.
Yeah.
Let's move on to qualitative data analysis strategy. We got to make sense of all this rich data.
Exactly.
So Dr. Adu highlights methods like content analysis, thematic analysis, and the constant comparative method. Those all sound a bit more, analytical than the previous category. How do these methods help us, really unlock the meaning within that qualitative data?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by just the sheer volume of data that qualitative research can generate, right?
Yeah.
These methods provide structured frameworks for analyzing text, images, audio recordings, really anything you've collected, to identify patterns, themes, and ultimately answer that research question.
So it's about moving beyond just describing what we see in the data and actually interpreting it, finding that deeper meaning and significance.
Exactly. And choosing the right analysis method is so crucial. It's like choosing the right lens for your camera. The right method will just bring your findings into sharp focus.
It's like having that perfect lens for your microscope. You
Yeah.
can suddenly see all those tiny details.
Yes. It really is about going beyond just summarizing the data. You have to dig into those nuances, the complexities, those unexpected connections. That's what makes qualitative research so fascinating.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about type of study. Dr. Adu mentions action research and systematic reviews here.
Right.
And those sound pretty different from each other.
They are. And that's a perfect example of how, this blueprint really allows you to tailor your approach to your specific goals.
Okay.
Action research is all about driving change in a real-world setting.
So less about, generating new knowledge just for the sake of knowledge, and more about using research as a tool for social or organizational improvement.
You got it. Imagine a group of teachers who want to improve student engagement in their classrooms. They could use action research to try out different teaching strategies, collect data on what's working, and then actually make adjustments based on those findings.
In real time. Yes.
Yeah. It's a very hands-on, iterative process where, like you said, that research and action are just going hand in hand.
Systematic reviews, on the other hand, those take kind of a bird's eye view, right?
Okay.
So imagine you're trying to answer a really big picture question like, What are the best interventions for reducing bullying in schools? A systematic review would involve gathering and analyzing all of the existing research on that topic.
Yes, and not just a handful of studies. We're talking about a comprehensive and rigorous examination of all the literature.
Wow, that is comprehensive. So it's about synthesizing a whole body of knowledge to try to answer a very specific question or maybe address like a gap in our understanding.
Exactly, and doing it in a way that really tries to minimize bias and make sure those findings are as reliable, as generalizable as possible.
This blueprint is honestly making me rethink what qualitative research can even be.
It's powerful stuff.
It's so much more like flexible and dynamic than I ever really realized. Okay, onto disciplinary lenses. Now this one seems pretty self-explanatory. You're basically, drawing on different fields of study to inform your research. But what makes this category so innovative?
Well, it's innovative because it really encourages us to break down those academic silos that oftentimes limit our thinking, right?
Yeah.
We live in a complex world with complex problems. Climate change, social inequality, technological advancement, these issues they don't fit neatly into one discipline.
So like if you're studying, say, the impact of artificial intelligence on the workforce.
Yeah, great example.
It wouldn't be enough to just look at it from a, purely technological perspective, right?
Mhm.
You'd want to bring in insights from sociology, economics, psychology.
Exactly, because each of those disciplines, they bring their own unique set of tools, their own theories, their own ways of just seeing the world. And by weaving those perspectives together, we gain a much richer, more holistic understanding of whatever it is we're studying.
I'm convinced. Interdisciplinarity for the win.
Yep.
Now, let's talk about the population, location, and/or era that the researcher is focusing on. Dr. Adu's examples here are things like historical methods and indigenous methods. Those feel particularly powerful to me. Can you talk about why this category is so important for pushing those boundaries of what qualitative research can be?
This category really forces us to confront our assumptions about whose voices we're actually listening to, whose stories get told, whose knowledge is considered valuable in the first place.
It's about representation.
Exactly. For too long, research has been dominated by, Western perspectives and methodologies.
Yeah. So by intentionally centering those marginalized communities, whether they're defined by, their ethnicity, their location, their historical experiences, or, even just their relationship to power, we can start to create space for a much wider range of voices and perspectives.
Precisely. And in doing so, we're not only just enriching our understanding of the world, we're actually starting to challenge those power dynamics that have traditionally excluded certain groups from the research process to begin with.
I love that. It's about like democratizing knowledge production, making sure that research is a tool for social justice and equity. Okay, final category, technology and/or virtual platform. This one feels especially, relevant in our increasingly digital world.
Absolutely. Technology is transforming how we live, how we work, how we even interact with each other, and qualitative research has to kind of, keep pace.
Yeah. So Dr. Du gives us ethnographic methods and cloud sourcing as examples. Can you break those down for us?
Yeah. Ethnography is basically like ethnography, but online, right?
Correct.
It's about really immersing yourself in those online communities. Forums, social media groups, even those virtual worlds.
It's fascinating.
It is, to really understand that culture, the language, and even the social dynamics of those online spaces.
So instead of observing people in, those physical spaces, researchers are now able to actually study their digital footprints.
Yes.
Their online interactions, their virtual selves even.
Exactly. And then cloud sourcing, that leverages the power of the crowd, Think about things like citizen science projects or even those online surveys. They allow researchers to collect data from such a large and diverse group of people, and oftentimes it's very cost effective.
Really opens up so many doors. It's like opening up a whole new universe of data and perspectives. This blueprint is really so much more than just a list of methods.
Yeah.
It's a completely new way of thinking about qualitative research. Like you're giving researchers the tools to become like architects of their own research designs, right?
I like that.
Like they're mixing and matching all these different elements to create something truly unique and impactful.
And that's exactly the point. Dr. Adu wants to empower researchers to be more creative, to be more innovative, and really challenge the boundaries of what's possible.
Okay, so we've covered all 8 categories of Dr. Adu's blueprint.
We did it.
We've talked about everything from philosophical paradigms to dance-based research to digital ethnography. But I have a feeling this is more than just, a choose-your-own-adventure situation. Like, you can't just randomly pick and choose from this blueprint, or can you?
You're right, it's not quite that simple. Remember that really crucial point that Dr. Adu makes? Clearly define the role each of the approaches will play in the study.
Right. You can't just throw in, like, a dance-based method or a virtual ethnography just because it sounds cool.
Right.
You really need to be intentional and strategic about, how you're using these different approaches and how they all fit together to ultimately answer that research question.
Precisely. It's like, baking a cake. You wouldn't just randomly toss ingredients into a bowl and hope for the best, would you? You'd want to follow a recipe, right? Have a plan, understand how those ingredients all work together.
Okay, that's a tastier analogy than the building a house one.
Right.
So it's about, being thoughtful and intentional, making sure those methods line up with your research question, your theoretical framework, really your overall goals for the study.
Exactly. It's about, having a vision for what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And then, selecting the best tools, the best approaches to get you there.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing. At the end of his blueprint, Dr. Adu encourages listeners to, reach out, to contact him for consultations. He even says, I can help you choose the right qualitative method for your study. This raises kind of an important question, I think. Why is choosing the right method so important? It seems like you've given us this pretty amazing toolbox here. Can't we just, go forth and innovate?
Well, it's fantastic to have a toolbox full of options, right? But imagine trying to frost that cake with a spatula when you really need a piping bag.
Okay, yeah.
You might get some frosting on there, but it's not going to be pretty.
Or precise.
Exactly. It's about using the right tool for the job. So it's not just about having all these options. It's about really understanding, which tool to use and when to use it and how to use it effectively to get those results you're looking for.
Okay, yeah. It makes sense.
Because, choosing the wrong method, it can kind of send you down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I could see that.
You start answering the wrong questions, or even worse, you misinterpret your data and then come to those inaccurate conclusions. And that undermines the entire research process.
Definitely not what we want. So it really does sound like Dr. Adu's consultation offer that could be incredibly valuable.
Oh, for sure.
He can help researchers navigate this really complex landscape, maybe avoid some of those potential pitfalls and make sure they're approaching their research in the most rigorous and effective way possible.
Absolutely. Because, ultimately, choosing the right method, that's about making sure that your research is not only innovative and exciting, but also, credible, insightful, and ethically sound.
That makes perfect sense. So what does all of this mean for you, dear listener? It means you're now armed with this really powerful blueprint for approaching qualitative research in a whole new way. You're no longer limited by those same old methods and approaches.
You can go out and venture into that uncharted territory, right? You can experiment with these new tools. You can ask those bolder, more imaginative questions. Who knows what groundbreaking discoveries await?
Exactly. And just remember that blueprint and Dr. Adu's offer are out there if you need a guiding hand. Until next time, happy deep diving.